everyone, I'm Tish Conlin for another episode of Tishtalk. Today I have a guest from the States, from San Diego, Peter Merrick. He was on the podcast last year, and we had a great chat. If you haven't listened to that one, go back to last year. I think it was June, we had a podcast. He's a financial expert. Peter, just for those who don't know him, is a Canadian expat. For the past 4 years, he's been living in San Diego. And he's author of what is your book called, Peter, that you've
my latest book is called The King of Main Street.
Cool.
And I'm working on my fifth book, and you're going to like the title. It's called Lied to Me. And let me share with you what it is. We want to be lied to. Most people want to be lied to. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, we lie to ourselves. We'd rather be lied to than to tell ourselves the truth. And we're going to spend the next hour, Tish, talking about how we allow ourselves to be lied to. And this is really great for me because I get to test my thesis in my book during this conversation.
Oh, well, excellent. I couldn't agree with you more. And this is one of the things I've unraveled, not lying, but facing our own selves is challenging, right? So, the level of resentment we feel, inadequacy, all these emotions as well. So yeah, so everyone, if you haven't subscribed, Tishtalk, Rumble, BitChute, it's on Spotify. Just for those who don't know, this is the book I wrote recently, The Thrive Protocol. I'll be doing a workshop in Newmarket for anyone listening in on the 17th, 6 steps to overcome fear and create a life you love. I'm doing a workshop called Spring House Cleaning. How you're going to get your house in order. And I mean, not just your physical house, every part of your house, mental, emotional, and spiritual right now. We're preparing for the big eclipse. What do you think of that, Peter? It's topical now. In Canada, they're like shutting down schools. They're saying have extra water. Like, this is all for a 2-minute dimming of the sun. Do you think something else is going on? Have you followed the path going through 6 Ninevehs? Sort of that spiritual connection to what's happening. I mean, it's undeniable. The sun trajectory passes through 6 cities or towns of Nineveh across the States and Canada. What do you think's going on there?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because last night when I have problems to sleep, I watch podcasts, and I watched about 4 or 5 of them that we're talking about. In 2017, I believe that the last time there was an eclipse that went the other way, it passed through towns called Salem or Shalom, peace. So it's very interesting. And it makes a cross. One of the questions that I started asking myself and going back to like lie to me, I wanted to believe the things I was told. And one of the big things that hit me, because I went down a lot of rabbit holes, and from, let's say, from the lockdowns to, I guess, until 2023 when we met, right now I spend a lot of time, if someone goes to petermerrick.com and they go to Peter Talks, like Tish Talks, maybe I actually borrowed that from you.
Okay.
Subconsciously, I started doing a brain dump. And if the world is around in 10 years, I've bought 10 years of hosting. So I've just been like looking at every significant moment, because when I was being introduced to all these things that really didn't matter to me, and I wanted to share with you about the 4 pills because it goes hand in hand with the eclipse. The 4 pills are really this. There's the blue pill. You might notice that something's happening, but you don't think it's going to happen to you. And it's easier just to lie to yourself, to accept what you're being told, especially if your rights are not being infringed upon. That's really important. And for many people who got very vocal, who went to Ottawa, who protested, who became active, many of them had never been active before because there was no reason in their own lives, their insular lives, to be active. So they're blue-pilled. And I will be honest, I was blue-pilled. And I'll just give you an example a conversation I had when I was doing the King of Main Street that sort of, I took note. And that's a good thing. Many people who woke up, they have a memory, and that is key, is having a memory and having the ability to then go and harvest that memory. So a good friend of mine is a producer of CBC. He's awake. And however, he goes to work and he has to go and act, whatever the party line is, because he's tied to a salary. And that's something which a lot of people bent the knee because they had this fear of being out on the street and what was happening. And he said to me, Peter, you don't understand. You don't understand what's happened in corporate culture in the last 20 years because you only work with entrepreneurs. And what do entrepreneurs do? Well, they treat the government and regulations and everything as a cold sore. They do everything to keep it out. And it was an oasis. And we talked in the last podcast that if you took the risk in Canada, Canada had one of the best tax regimes to promote small business earning up to $500,000, where you would only pay right now 12.2% corporate tax. That means you could write off everything you could justify and you would pay little tax. Well, these people who took risk, who are carrying right now, I read a really scary stat that 25% of the Canadian workforce is now on the dole. Just to give perspective to people, there's a little over 400 representatives in Congress. Well, in Canada, they have over 400 representatives in Parliament. Now, if the United States was to have the same, 338. But if the United States was to have the same type of representation, people who are just sitting on the back bench, who are going to be getting pensions for not doing anything, I'll point that out. The United States in Congress would have to have 3,200 representatives, right? It's like it's over bloated. And the other thing that I realized, just wanted to share with you, Canada was promoting like, hey, we have new jobs. They were all government sector jobs.
Well, exactly. And you may not know, I'll just interject because this is your point. All MPs got a raise April 1st, like one of the highest paid in the world. All 338 have done nothing but contribute to our, poisoning and enslavement and bankruptcies and impoverishment. And it was the same day, April 1st, that the new third level carbon tax got introduced. So I was out with a bunch of farmers in Uxbridge doing a convoy on that day. But it's just crazy. If you from a financial perspective, Canada is just, for entrepreneurs, I don't know. It's insane.
What did Trudeau say before he got anointed as our dog king? And I'll share that in a minute. He said budgets balance themselves. You've got Christina Friedland, who never balanced a budget in her life, and she struts around all the time, and she's now borrowing another $500 billion, like it's nothing, like drunken sailors, and they're making off like bandits. And we really have seen the corruption. It's out there. Like I saw a video recently showing Justin Trudeau's net worth in 1992. He's my age, and showing what it is now, and it is unbelievable.
Well, it's the same with all of the heads of parties. Polyev, who's never had another job but political, and there's, if you calculate whatever 100,000 ton 50, he's got tens of millions he's made over COVID, and his wife as well. Jagmeet Singh, they've all like multi millions over the last few years. And so this is, there's nothing wrong with being successful, but successful while you're in government with who knows where they're getting all of these contracts or whatever leads. I don't know how they're getting all this money, But anyways, that's probably worse in other countries. You see the graph. That's sort of worldwide. But anyways, you were talking about the blue pill. We're still on
Okay,
the eclipse.
let
So
me
yeah,
so
let's
let
go
me go
back to
to
the
the
eclipse.
eclipse. I
Yeah.
apologize, Tish. It was just such an interesting conversation. I'm sorry for like getting a
No,
little
I
off
love
track,
it.
and I
I
thank
love
you for
going
bringing me
down.
back. So let's talk
That's
about the
my
blue
goal.
pill.
Yeah.
The blue pill is like, I don't really ask questions because it's not affecting me. I don't think it's a point to
Right,
affect me.
right.
So what my friend says, you don't understand. You don't understand what's happening in the public sector within corporations because you're insulated. And he was right, because I just worked with self-employed people. Now we were going out and we're noticing things, but it
Right.
wasn't affecting us. In 2017, I was in a government building sitting down with a client, and two things happened that just woke me up or made me take notice. And one was, uh, I had a new form to sign a life insurance contract. And on the form, it said sex at birth. Never saw that before. I'm going like, what? Like, I thought there's
Yeah.
just two genders, right? Like, I can understand that you might want to dress differently and whatever, but like your chromosomes are your chromosomes.
Mhm.
And then I had to go to the washroom. Now, I use that word for my Canadian friends because it took years to learn the word bathroom, because it would take people too long to, translate that, and I might wet my pants. So I washroom for my Canadian friends, it's bathrooms for my American friends. So I
Okay.
go to the bathroom or the washroom, and there's the male sign. It's there. I walk in. I think I walked into the wrong washroom because there's no urinals. And I had to step out. And I go, and someone's there, and he's going in, and he goes and I said, this is the men's washroom? He said, yes. Kathleen Wynne, one of the last things that she mandated that Ford has not changed is any renovation that happens in an Ontario building, they will remove the urinals. And I'm
Oh,
and
just
I'm and I yeah,
just
and I'm because
emasculating the men. Oh my God,
well,
that is so
but there's
awful.
certain things I never really paid attention to, but at that moment I took note, right? And it was probably
Right.
like 2000. It was spring of 2017, and then I was on vacation in San Diego because I wasn't living in San Diego, and I was driving around with my ex, and we were looking at properties, and I was just humoring her. Well, my phone went off like crazy. Like, I was getting messages like it'd been the budget. Because for those who don't know, my expertise was Canadian tax and Canadian US cross border. So really the only time your phone goes off, where all the tax groups in the top law firms and all the tax groups and the accounting firms send out messages like one after another, it happens to be when the federal government introduces the budget. Well, this was during the summer. What was it? Trudeau's government was going to fundamentally change the income tax act and attack small business, literally attack it. Now, that was the first blow. The second one was during COVID when they locked down everything. So here I am, they're going to change it. Now, the last time they did a fundamental change to the Income Tax Act was in 1972. 10 years prior, they had a commission called the Carter Report, and it took 10 years of discussing and figuring how they were not going to disrupt the Canadian economy. Now, here I am believing in the country because life is good. And they've got 70 days that they're going to ram this thing through. And I'm
We,
going like, what? I'm going like,
yeah.
wow. Well, one of my wake up moments happened at the end of the summer. There was a gentleman, his name is Kim Moody. He's one of the top tax practitioners in Canada. And on his own dime, he went across Canada to educate business people and professionals. Now, out west in Alberta, where they still believe in sovereignty and the individual, he spoke to packed rooms.
You were
He
telling
came,
me this. We
yeah,
went, this story is powerful. Yes.
right. Because this was like, because what I'm trying to share is about being blue pilled, where, but you notice things that happen. It doesn't directly impact you, but you know something's wrong.
Right. Right. So
So,
nobody
so
showed up for these
nobody showed
talks.
up. And I just also want to step back to 2014. I was at a client's meeting and it was a nice day. And I accidentally walked into a pro Hamas, pro terrorist protest in Dundas Square. There were a bunch of police officers wearing shorts and having bikes, and they were just sitting there. And I registered something at that point. We had about 2,000 people. They were all chanting. They were all chanting um, from the river to the sea, which means the destruction of a country. That's what it means. It doesn't mean like, a two-state solution. It means the inhabitants of that country do not have a right to exist. And that, if someone said that to us, we would be a little upset. Then 1/3 of them started chanting Jews to the gas chambers. I'm sitting there in shock. Like maybe this was said in private, but it wasn't. People felt emboldened.
And
And then
nobody did
speakers got
anything.
up. The
No,
cops just stood there, but it got worse. It got worse. The speakers got up, and you know what they were asking for or calling for? To bring jihad to Canada and the US. Anybody who understands what jihad is, it means holy war. And if you happen to be a fundamentalist, Islamist, if that's the terminology they use, what that means is people are going to be living under Sharia. And that means you ask them to convert. Then if they do not convert, you have them pay a 50% tax called the jizya. And if they refuse that, you kill them. You kill them. So if you have someone who actually believes the writing in some text that became sacred, this is not this does not go hand in hand with the Canada I knew. Now, of course, there's always been people who project their racism, but it wasn't condoned that people would say it in public. Now, I went home that night, Tish, and I looked up the criminal code for treason. I looked it up. I needed to do it because I was in shock. Like, this is my
yeah.
country, and the cops are standing there and not doing anything. And there's people are literally calling to overthrow our society. They're not just looking at what's happening 6,000 miles away. They're actually
No.
saying, make it happen here. And in the criminal code, it said if you call for a sedition like that, it is a crime. And they just sat there and they did nothing.
Well,
So
it's
my
gotten
blue pill,
worse. It's gotten worse
I
in Canada. We have so many
oh
people calling for Sharia law in different towns. Because we have I mean, I don't know how many millions of people. Now, this is part of people who haven't tuned in. This is an absolute part of the United Nations Agenda 2030 to allow mass migration, overrun Western countries, a lot of radicalized people. Now, I'm all for, appropriate immigration. I've had a recruitment firm my whole life, but this is destructive, inappropriate. Here in my own town, you go to stores, all of the workers have been replaced with people who've just come in basically off the plane from India, and they're getting subsidized by the employer. It's so unfair. So teenagers can't get jobs. There was one lady there, and she said her friend tried to get a job like a local person, and she couldn't, and she's homeless now. The situation is dire. Today, I went to get my son a bagel at Tim Hortons. He loves it. They gave him the wrong kind, so I went back, and I saw a man sitting there homeless, a young man. I ended up going talking to him for a while. He's got a diploma or training in robotics, quite smart, mathematics degree. He's homeless, can't find a job here in Canada. He doesn't fit any of the requirements. I don't think he can get welfare. He's not jabbed. I mean, it's absolute, and everyone there is a foreigner inside, except one or two people. I mean, we are being replaced. Another guy at one of the shops here said a whole community north in northern Ontario is trying to get Sharia law in. So, and he's like, "Oh, it'll be okay." I I mean, if people don't say anything, I'm not sure how it is going to be okay. It's very
We're
destructive
too
to our
polite.
society. With
We're too
Canadians,
polite.
yeah. And that the people who have spoken out for years are so burnt out, because a lot of people just stay silent. And it's a constant reminder of our own enslavement is prolonged indefinitely through cowardice and apathy. But anyways, you're talking about, we've only gone through
Well,
one pill, Peter.
the
We
blue,
got to get
well,
the other pills.
but it's very important. It's very important for people to understand the essence of the blue pill is you notice things, but it's not affecting your life directly. Therefore, you ignore it because there might be only 1/3 of Canadians who are absolutely asleep who are NPCs. 1/3 of them to probably about, like probably the extra 50% happen to be people who see it,
Right,
but
we got
they
it.
don't
Yeah.
say anything,
That's
right? They don't
most
say,
people in Canada, and that's why those
and
is
that's why
some of
there's
us.
tyranny. That's why there's
Exactly.
tyranny. It's that group. It's
It's
that
that
group
group.
that sees it.
I fault them more than the people who are asleep by a mile, because they are
I do as
they are
well.
part of the problem. They're sitting out is part of the problem, doing nothing. Absolutely, in Canada.
And that's how every single system in history has fallen because of that group. And I believe in Canada, it's probably about 50 to 55%. I
Do you mean,
truly
wait,
believe that.
I just wanted to clarify. You said that that's how systems have fallen. You mean that's how that good systems have fallen because people do nothing.
Yes.
They don't hold their government
Yes. And
accountable.
it's that
Yeah.
group. It's
And
that
it's the
group that actually know, but they do nothing. They choose because they say, what can I do? Well, the
They
next
don't even
pill.
say that, Peter, because I know a bunch of them. It's not, they want other people to take the fall while they sit there sit there cushy, in their little safety bubble and hoarding their gold, while other people take the fall, and they think that they'll be saved, they'll be protected from any consequences. That's the biggest group, I think, right now. Not
Well,
sticking
there
their
was
necks
this
out.
just before I move on to the red pill, there was a minister, his name was Mueller, and he was put into a concentration camp, and he made a statement that people should listen to, but no one knows their own history. Because he talked about the Nazi regime. And what he says is this: first, they came for the trade unionists, and I wasn't a trade unionist, so I said nothing. Then they came for the socialists, and I wasn't a socialist, so I said nothing. Then they came for the Jews, and I wasn't a Jew, so I said nothing. Then they came for me, and nobody spoke for me. So if you keep quiet, there's enough of us to say no. Every single tyranny that's ever existed on this planet has fallen when people say, no, I will not acquiesce to tyranny. At that point, there happens to be many more of us than the little peons that we
Right.
see in Ottawa and the people who
Right.
just follow. Now, I want to share with you my biggest wake-up call and what got me speaking. So
Moved
I
you to the
remember when
red pill? Is this what
yes,
moved?
this is the
Yeah.
red. This is the red pill. The red pill is when you can't deny it anymore.
And you
It's
actively
directly
go out.
impacting.
You speak out. You do
Oh,
stuff. You write to
you
people.
do.
You protest.
You do. You start saying, hey, don't you see that there's an eclipse? Don't you see there's a dead human being in front of us? You start pointing out, how can you not see it?
Yeah.
But the thing is, you have to be honest to yourself. And I will talk about how I wrote about how you speak to somebody who is asleep or how you wake them up, because you don't want to put them into cardiac arrest, right? Because it's very difficult, because you know as well as I do, Tish, when you wake up, all you want to do is yell. And then at night, all you want to do is stick your head in the pillow and cry. So let me share with you.
And
Yeah,
you go
that's what
down.
happens during red pill. And
Yeah.
you go down there, and then you go down those rabbit holes and like these things, and you're blown away because
Yeah, and
you're
some of
now
them are
going,
psyops too. Like there's a lot of
oh, for
psyops
sure.
within psyops, and people at first I'm like, oh, okay, all this, and then you realize, oh, that's a fake, that's a fake. But it takes time and to have the discernment to really sort of figure out
Oh,
what's
we're
possible.
gonna get, you're getting to the third pill. We're not at the third pill yet, but
Oh,
that is
okay, I'm always
you're
jumping
good.
ahead.
So we're in the red pill. You're getting
Okay.
really angry. So what was it for Peter Merrick? What was it? Okay, so when I grew up, I met someone who was a familiamide baby. For those of you who do not know familiamide,
We know
familiamide was a morning sickness pill that they gave to women within the first 3 months, and that's the
in the
time that the limbs
60s.
are forming on a in the 60s and the late
Yeah.
50s when limbs are forming. And because of that medication, women in the West, I can't say around the world, but they won't even have a tin of tuna because God forbid there's mercury in it. They quit smoking. They don't do anything
Yes.
because they're
Yeah.
protecting the child. So I remember that. And now they've got this experiment that has just come up. I don't know what it is. I've done my research and I'm saying, you know, at first I was being polite. I'm just going to see what everyone else does because I'm not red pilled yet, right?
Is this
And
COVID?
then
You're talking COVID
this
now?
is during COVID. This
Yeah.
is in 21. I'm in California. My children are not participated in this. They're able to
Thank
go to
God.
school. They have to be masked.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, other people in my family close to me did not heed. Like when I was yelling and screaming, "Don't take it!" Why do it? I
Same
want to
with
go on
me.
vacation. I want to do this, and I lost a lot of friends. So let me share with you my real wake up moment.
Red pill
They were going to
moment.
admit
Yeah.
my red pill moment, like where I just realized this impacts me. So the San Diego school board was going to mandate that children over the age of 16 would have to get the shot or
I
they'd be
read
kicked
that.
out of school. And then they had these people who I wouldn't call people, they were creatures who got elected to the school board. I was hearing this woman who really was a racist, but she was hiding behind the fact that she was a minority about core and
Yes.
teaching about how whites were not good. And it slipped. They had this little pencil neck student who wasn't happy that they were going to mandate it for, kids down to, let's say, grade 4. He wanted it to be like nursery school, this little guy who'd been given power. And these people I would not allow near my children. And they were actually got elected to a position that I didn't think really meant anything. I laughed about it when I was a kid, like, oh, a school board trustee. Well, guess what? Guys like George Soros know that. And they basically took over these things because guess what? They got huge amount of leverage for the money they spent. Better than if they spent it on a
Oh,
Senate race
yeah.
or for leadership. It was
Uh,
great leverage. But it impacted me because I had to deal with the situation that my kids were going
mhm.
to be kicked out of school for what? Misbehaving? No, because I, as their parent,
Yeah.
as the person who's responsible for them until they get 18, because if they get in a car accident or anything, I'm responsible for that. That these people you would not allow around your children. I wish I could pull up the screen who they were, but let me share with what these cowards did as well that night, because I want this picture to be in people's minds. They knew that there were parents who were going to say no. They had a right to say no because this is America. America has a constitution. Canada just has a piece of paper with privileges, right? This is a constitution. Everything's based on the constitution. So they were
It's
too
such a
scared.
good document, well written. Thank God for the U.S.
It is.
Constitution.
It is because of their
Canadian Charter
history.
of Freedoms and Rights is something, or Bill of Rights, but they're not nearly as good. Yeah, not even
It's
the
a bunch of privileges. They can take it
yeah.
away easily.
They do. Well,
In the first paragraph, it says.
Canada's so far left right now, it's not funny. But yeah, it's all collectivism. It's
So
basically communism here. All the
it
judges are
is,
appointed. They all do whatever they're told,
and
as do
because
the
they're all comfortable,
politicians. Yeah.
They're all selected. So at this meeting, I'm looking at this, and what they did is they were so cowardly to go and talk to real people who had investigated everything. They decided that they were going to do it online. They did it online, and they were cutting off the people who were speaking out against it. They were just like, oh, we've dropped them. And then they let in these shills. And now people don't know this. I live in San Diego. I didn't know this before, but in 1969, Jonas Salk was convinced to move here. They created the Salk Institute. This is ground zero. Ground zero for vaccines, for studying make-believe viruses. This is ground zero. So people here are like wearing masks, and you could tell, you know, when you were a kid, Tish, you wanted to be able to have mind reading skills like what was someone's head. I got to share with you, COVID was the opportunity, because you were able to see people who walked outside with masks and other people didn't. You know exactly where they stood. And then the people who, like me, who would walk into a store and I'd say I'm exempt, and I said,
that's what I said too. Yeah.
But after in the United States,
yes.
After in the United States, if you ask me what my ailment is, there's a bill called OSHA. I'd hold it up and I said, you want to ask me again, because there's a $70,000 fine. And then I turn my camera on and they'd always let me in.
That is funny. I did stuff like that too. Listen, I can tell you, in Canada, I think the boards are as bad or worse. A friend of mine, Linda Smith, was just had to resign. It's so bad in Durham. She's literally bullied. And it's just what you say. People who are put in these positions are absolutely racist themselves. They can say hateful, horrific things about people, a certain color of skin, if it happens to be lighter, and they push the gender ideologies like crazy. So our kids are all screwed up, but academically their scores have plummeted, but they don't even seem to care. We need to get rid of all these school boards. I think they need to be ended. They serve a negative, destructive purpose, nothing positive, and they all get buckets of money to enforce their tyranny. They're little mini tyrants. They're like Gestapo themselves. And they don't listen. I don't know how many meetings I've been to. I presented once, they cut my mic off, presenting about what's happening to mental health with kids because of all these ideologies. And I don't know, they've canceled meetings, they've kicked people out. We've had to protest out front because they refuse to listen. So I think down the road, the school boards will have to be abolished once we get new leadership in. But anyways, that was your red pill moment.
Red pill. And if everybody has that red pill moment, and at that point you say, what else did I don't know? Because there's several things I started asking. I asked a question to myself at that moment. I sort of remember, because I'm watching this thing, watching it on my phone, walking outside, getting fresh air, right? Watching how, having them talk about how they're doing the education on religions and race and everything, and seeing the person who's in charge of it who should not be around kids, seeing these people who they should not have been around kids. Like, these are people in the past when things were normal. Maybe you would call the police, right? Like you would have to call the police, but now these people have gotten inside to where children are, because we were asleep. So at that point,
we let it happen. It's our fault collectively. We need to take responsibility for allowing all this.
We have to take responsibility. So I want to share with the audience what I came to the understanding, a question I started asking, because I'm confronted. I can't avoid it. I'm thinking my grade 4-year-old, like my grade 4 is going to be kicked out of school. She's going to be ostracized. They got to keep quiet. Like, we're like now Jews in Germany trying to like hide, not having the discussion, all this crazy stuff. And you were excluded too, because people would, they would be part of this cult. And I was watching it in Canada too. I see my mother holding at Sunnybrook Hospital a big needle, like she's like sacrificed for the war effort. Like, and I'm going like, and then I watch in Canada, and I'm thinking, and when you and I would drink, we wouldn't mix drinks, right? We know what happens. Well, AstraZeneca is the flavor.
Yes.
Oh, it's not good. Now let's do Moderna. Like no one knows what these.
No,
It's okay.
they said just you get what you get and you don't get upset. I think they just say take what you take and don't ask questions. And people like, okay, whatever. Anyways, let's move on
So
to
so
the
so
next
so
pill.
now
Yes,
now the
we'll
next
never
pill
get to
happens.
the eclipse.
We're gonna do. But I have. But before we move to it, there's questions that I want your audience to know because this is really important. I started asking myself in that red pill moment, why do I believe what I believe? Because at that point, you start really over educating yourself, you get overwhelmed. And you're right, there's so much stuff out there, and it's like there's so many things you never thought. Actually, I am grateful for what happened because my mind reopened.
Yes.
I became like, I never enjoyed, wasn't even like enjoying it. It's like I was just like sucking it in. I was reading
That's what happened to
UN,
me.
yeah,
Yeah. And then you
the
realize
agenda 2100, agenda, agenda 2030. I was reading, I was reading the
but
World Economic Forum stuff. I like literally I was going to all these books, and I was going back to books like Brave New World, and I was going back
yeah,
and
me
reading
too.
about I started reading everything that I shouldn't do, and I had a reason to do it. And that's really what education is. It's either you
Well,
really enjoy something, you have a reason. And I was going deep. And then what happens to all of us, Tish? We fight, like you're talking about, you're exhausted, everything, you're yelling and screaming, you're saying the sky is falling, like, do you not see this? And people look at you, they push you away, I can't
well, they
talk to you.
know, let me say, they call you crazy. This happened to me. Like, I thought, my God, they're trying to kill us with these shots. They're totally poison. I thought, what a normal thing to, like, if you love your friends, to warn them. I'd listen to a Dr. Simone Gold, and I started seeing stuff. It was like, it was so obvious. And I thought they'd say, oh, thanks, Tish, I agree with you. But instead, it was like, oh my God, what happened to Tish? She's crazy now, and it's like, Tish, like, then they would get angry. The responses were so weird and irrational. It's like, oh my God, stop talking to me, Tish. That was another way. That was a different type of a wake up. How people are so
It is.
programmed with their beliefs that you can't break through no matter what evidence you provide them. And that's when I lost, like, my everybody left me at that point. That was a different
You
level of
have me,
red pill.
Tish, because we'll talk about that at the end, about the last pill. But let me just share
Okay.
before we move on to the black pill, because right now we're in the red pill. So I asked a question: why do I believe what I believe? And then I actually came up with five, and hopefully I can remember them, reasons. One was I was told by people in authority, my family, whatever, there's no reason to question. And then I was either too busy when I was working, or I was too lazy to even formulate the question, or I was too stupid to know that the question evolved. And then most importantly, and that's what you're talking about, I didn't want to be ostracized by the group for actually having a different way, because you hear in history and you've seen it personally, the person, people are by that person, and this is how societies are controlled, by the top. They put edicts out, and it's not the top that actually does it, because if no one listened, then it would fall apart. It happens to be all these people are holding them together, and I was part of them. I had to deal with that there were times in my life that I was part of it, because I didn't want to be the one picked on. You see a kid being picked on, it's wrong, by a bully. Oh, you might actually go and say, yeah, why did you do that when you were a kid? Because you didn't want to be picked on yourself, right? It wasn't you. And I had to
Yeah.
go and confront this. I had to deal with things, and I came down to one common denominator. The only thing of value is soul, because everything else is transient. You're going to lose it. It doesn't matter. I knew someone in Toronto who passed away. He had accumulated $2.2 billion worth of real estate. I went
2.2
to the
billion?
grave of real estate,
Billion or
and I
million?
went billion,
Oh,
B,
yeah.
B, B.
That's
Bill,
a good amount.
his wife died, and 6 months later he died. They had a really incredible relationship. They were very supportive. She had cancer, so she decided to do MAID, and I don't know if he did MAID 6 months later. However, I go to the grave site, and they own so much. They own about 6.5 million square feet of retail space across Canada, right? So what do I see? I see they're both going to be an eternity, or this is where they're placed. There's a headstone. His graving hasn't gone on to it, but it's probably 6 feet wide by 9, and that's it. So here's someone who you be told had so much. This is where they're going to be. And the question I always ask now, how do I live, right? Because you get most people I discovered, and we'll talk about this,
Afraid to
they don't
die.
live.
Well, because they're
And that's how
afraid
they
to
control it.
die. Yeah, and
Yes. So they never live.
I have to say what you're referring to here and what we're all called to do is break with the cult, have the courage to speak out. Like, I don't know if it's called the Milgram experiment. I think it's a perfect
Yep.
time to highlight how they did this fake experiment for those who aren't aware. And they got all these volunteers. They got people dressed as fake, fake doctors, and they got a guy all hooked up to these like electric shocks, and they made the people make the shocks increasingly like high voltage to hurt the guy. And the guy he was an actor, he'd be going like this, screaming in pain. And then they told the people to put it to the point where it would be lethal. And unless someone spoke up, the one person who broke and said, "Hey, I'm not doing that," everyone went along. So it was a psychological experiment on groupthink. If you don't have the courage to break with the group and say, "Hey, I don't think that sounds right. I don't think we should do it," then everyone tends to go along, particularly when someone in a position of authority, that's the other thing, government, politician, doctor, respected figure, celebrity says to do it. And this is the thing in this time.
You know what I call that? And since hopefully this doesn't get bleeped out, because I was like this when I was a young kid. Star fuckers. Oh, this person's this. Oh, they must know, right? Like, I'm going to abdicate my responsibilities. I'm abdicating. I'm not delegating. I'm abdicating. That's really what it is. People have abdicated to everything else. Like, you focus on health, and how the body will heal itself. People treat it, oh, they're going to give me a pill and that's going to cure me. No, your body is what cures you, right? We're built with it, but we're told everything is outsourced, and everybody's outsourced everything. So
Well,
I just want to
friends
share
now.
something. So I just want to share something with you. I realize I go so deep down, I get so depressed, right? Because
Yeah,
I'm
it can be
losing
dark.
friends.
Yeah.
I'm losing people. I'm losing. I don't know what to do, and I'm doing my own little protest, but I'm not putting on a mask. I'm telling off like the security guard. He's telling me to put on a
That's
mask.
what
I have
I
to.
did.
You
Yeah.
know, I had a woman confront me when I was outside on the
Oh,
phone, and she says, "Is this your
yeah.
office? Is this your office?" I live in the area. I said, "I live here." She kept on asking me. I looked at her and I said, "This is because I'm not wearing a mask." Like, she came out towards me, like if she's
Yeah.
so scared, why? No, because it had nothing to do with that. I now have authority. So you know what I said to her? I said, everybody wonders how they would have handled themselves during the Holocaust. You failed. You would have turned in Anne Frank. She walked out
Exactly.
indignant.
No, I know.
It's like, so so
So
little
many
people without
people,
any.
they have to live with
So
themselves. They have to live with themselves. They know that they did that. They got that's
I
got to
don't
weigh
know.
on a
I
person.
don't know. I'm going to share with you what my thoughts are at the end. So now we're into the black pill. So we did the red pill. Sorry, the blue pill. I choose to be asleep, not confronted. Red pill. I wake up. I start yelling fire. I try to wake everyone up. No one's listening. Now I'm black pill. The world is fucked. It's fall. It's the sky is falling. We're not gonna we're
The
not gonna survive this one.
Luciferian cult is getting us all. Yeah.
Yeah, we're done. It's like, and you just get depressed. And I do that depression. Last year when I was in Toronto, I shared with you a little that my life sort of fell apart.
Yeah.
Like, literally, I came back to Toronto and all these people had forgotten how they also behaved during COVID, right?
Yeah, I
They
know.
forgot, and they're like, I had missed it. So in essence, he's in California, he's a little off, right? It's like, no, I'm Torontonian. I'm
Hmm.
sorry. I value my freedom. I don't believe in communism and are you a liberal or Democrat? I'm an individualist, and there's collectivism, and history is shown, and I don't care what the name is, fascism, Nazism, like Bolshevism.
Communism.
It's
Yeah.
it's the individual versus the group, and the group will trample on many. So this is something that I am staunch. I'm an individualist. That's it. So here I am. I'm completely depressed. Everyone in my
Black
family's gotten
pilled,
jabbed.
black pilled.
Yeah, I'm black pilled. I'm completely depressed. I look at people, I say,
What's the point?
you're gonna die. I had a number of friends of mine who died, like
From the
with
shot? Post shot?
from the shot, and also I had a really good friend that also was a big wake up call. I wrote an article that Naomi Wolf posted, and happened a week prior to the truckers, because I was completely lost. A good friend of mine, he was going to be made a magistrate, a judge. He was forced into retirement because he wouldn't get jabbed. He was OCD, like, he was a super guy, funny, everything, but he needed things the way he is. He took the last plane out that he went to Acapulco. He told me that they were checking everybody's luggage to see. This is on the 27th of October, 21.
Yeah,
That's the day before they said you can't fly, which in the
right.
Constitution says, right, as a Canadian, I remember reading it, is a
Yeah,
right to travel, right? That's a
yeah, I know.
constitutional
Maxime
point. And
Bernier
they
has taken the government to court over that, and they're at the Supreme Court level. Yeah, they were protesting. But
right,
anyway,
and
carry on.
so he says, what do? They start looking through everyone's bags to see if they bring you more than $10,000 cash. I'm going, oh my God, this is like crazy. This is when he leaves. So my friend can't handle the changes. It's like he's forced into retirement. He was 62. He would be 65 today. He was going to be a magistrate. He was going to live in Mexico and live in Canada and whatever. But now he's thinking, I'm going to go forever to Mexico and live there and not have tyranny. He couldn't handle it because he didn't have his.
Oh, your sound's cut off, Peter. Your sound. You've just cut out. Nope. I was such a good story too.
I can go back to it.
There. Yeah, there we are. We
Okay.
got you back. So
So
you're saying
so
what happened to him?
okay, so let me share with you. So my friend, he leaves, he goes to Mexico. Everything was taken away from him. He leaves. If he didn't leave the day he left, he bought a first class ticket because that's
Yes.
all he could get. He paid like 2,500, but he says, I'm getting out of this craziness. He couldn't handle it. He comes back. He doesn't have a job anymore because he's been forced into retirement. He's not going to be made a judge because he wouldn't
Right.
he wouldn't participate in the jab. And he was being called by the Nazi police to make sure he wasn't leaving
Oh, yeah,
his
the
location. And
isolation shit. Yeah.
so I get a call on December 26th, and he's been found dead. He took his
Oh,
life. And I consider him just as much a casualty to the jab, to this tyranny, as anything
he
else.
was.
So
He
I
was
I
murdered.
wrote I wrote
Story.
when I get
What a
really
loss.
depressed.
What a
Oh,
it's like it's a bloodbath. I think Canada
it
is one
hurts
of the
me.
worst. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I
And
this story.
but and then I listened to Naomi Wolf talking to Vaccine Choice Canada, and I can't remember who the individual was. It was the man who
Ted
was on that
Kunst.
pod.
Ted
I
Kunst.
think so.
Yeah.
He's got hair and it's gray. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
he's
he
been
goes.
on my podcast. Great guy. Really
So
nice guy.
what he says to Naomi Wolf is to say, well, there's no fight in Canada, and I'm like, I'm sitting there going like, yeah, my country's dead. Like, I drank the Kool-Aid back. Tish, remember when we were growing up? Oh, the UN says we're the greatest country in the world. Toronto's the greatest, the clean, whatever. And it's like, yeah, and Canadian, for our American friends who are listening, the pastime is to say how great Canadians are, right? And how crazy Americans are. Like, oh, they have
Yeah,
guns.
that
Oh,
was encouraged.
they, they, yeah,
Yeah, as our friend Matthew Arrett will say, that was encouraged by our owners, by the imperialistic British, because they didn't want us to get too friendly with the US and adopt their Republican system. Yeah,
So I ended up getting like really
black pilled.
bad black belt, and I wrote this. I used his life as an example of what was happening, because here was someone who contributed to the country his entire life, never crossed, like he didn't jaywalk, or not, or felt
And was
guilty
it like
to.
a really intelligent man contributing to
Oh,
society, very
brilliant,
successful? What a loss.
brilliant man,
It makes me so
brilliant.
upset. So would you
So
say, let me just
so I just want to share what I
okay.
just want to share, because the black pill moment, I felt so goddamn depressed. I reached
Yes.
out to Naomi Wolf. I gave her the article. She put it all over her Substack everywhere, and it got over 2.3 million reads. Right. I ended up
Beautiful.
being taken off of LinkedIn for this, and because I was speaking out, and because I was just, but I felt like depressed, and then I watched a program. It was a podcast. Laura Lynn speaking to, I can't remember his name. The guy who was organizing the truckers, and she makes a call. She tells her
Chris
husband from
Barber?
across. No,
Chris,
no, no, no. He sounds so Canadian. He'll come back. I'm
it's
having
okay.
a senior moment, ladies and gentlemen. A senior moment.
There's so many
So
names to remember, new
right.
names in our
So
life
so
now.
she goes and yells. She yells to her husband. She's going to Ottawa. She doesn't know why, but this is Laura Lynn, uh
Yeah.
Thompson Taylor. She's going. And to me, that was like the herald. And then when it happened, I cried. I don't know, I never cried so, like I'm watching this and I'm going, my country has life. I never
Yes,
got
it was
more.
so beautiful. That's one of the great losses of people who sat on the sidelines is being part of the Canadian Trucker Freedom Convoy is an incredible memory I'll hold for the rest of my life. Even brought my son up one weekend. I mean, incredible spirit and love and joy and civil defiance, and
But
also
love, not this
love,
crap
the
that's happening
love.
right now that they allow to happen. We're talking love. Everyone he told me,
Yeah.
and I'm going to go, everyone told me that they never felt such serenity in their life. I was told a beautiful story by this young guy who's a tax lawyer now. He was in law school. His mother's close brother had died in Buffalo. They were originally from London, and she couldn't go to the funeral. She was heartbroken. So he said, "Come up to Ottawa," and then the trucker convoy
Yes,
happened.
right.
He said he never saw his mother so happy, to the point they went and spent about $800 buying pizzas and giving it to the truckers and hugging. He said, "My mother died 5 months later, but I never saw her. I never felt like this was like," and I grew up with this woman. And he said, like, I never, like, it was the most wonderful thing. And they lied to everybody. They lied.
Of course, yeah.
They lied, and they got people thinking these were like bad people. Now they got these crazies. These real people are going to overthrow the country, and they go and say, well, they're good people.
Oh, you mean all
It's
the
we should be understanding.
protesters now? You wouldn't, did you see a picture of they have armed police officers in Calgary or Alberta for a carbon tax protest with these huge guns and they've got bandanas like covering most of their face. It's crazy. That's for peaceful people protesting the carbon tax, but for radicals, they bring them donuts and coffee. I mean, we're
Yeah.
truly upside down here in Canada. But
So the black pill, that's the black pill, right? Like, what do I
but if
do? Can I
let
go on?
me ask you about the black pill because in your perspective, maybe in your book, does that cover that like dark place where you realizes that it's truly a satanic system? They're trying to kill us, poison us. They want your kids. They're trying to impoverish you, take away all your money. I mean, that sort of level, and it's a reality slap, can get you really down, and all your friends are gone, and no one gets you, and you're on your own. You have to live the rest of your life like this. Or is it also part of the finding other like-minded people like at the Trucker Freedom Convoy, those few people like you have the courage to speak out and creating those bonds? Or is that the next pill? Like, is the black
That's
pill
the,
just
that is the next pill.
okay? I
The
was gonna
black
say,
pill
yeah,
is
the
where you
black
say,
pill's a
the
bad one
world sucks. I'm
and it
going to die.
sucks.
It's always been this way. At least I know about it. There's nothing I could do. I'm going to lose everything. They're going to knock on my door and they're going to take me to some ditch and shoot me. Literally,
And
that's it.
what's the point? Yeah, okay. But
You know
at
what?
that
That's
point,
what
you're
happened
still
to my friend. That's what
okay.
happened to my friend Larry, who killed himself. He says, they're already calling him to make sure he doesn't leave his place so the shoots
Okay.
finds and everything.
Yeah.
And he got black pilled. And what did he do? He takes his own life.
Oh,
That's
and
what
we
black
don't
pill is. You
want
say.
that. Okay. So what's
So
the final pill?
so I want to, before we leave the black pill, I came to an understanding recently that I realized before you can go into the white pill, which is why I'm wearing white. No,
Oh,
I
I
just, I
like
just,
this.
I wanted to show off my tan, right? And I got it
I
since I
know,
saw
I'm
you, Tish.
jealous.
Since I saw you, I swim every day, and I've
I
lost a lot of weight
know.
because
You
I
look
moved
great,
into.
Peter. You look
Well, I
great.
moved into. Thank you. I moved into my white pill because, like, all the problems I realized something while I was in my black pill. I said, the people on our side, the awake side, and the people who are on the sleep side fighting for everyone getting jabbed and whatever, and everyone's saying, I got to go and get canned foods and I got to get guns and I got
Yeah.
to go and do all this stuff. Guess what? I remember reading a book which I would recommend for any of you. It's called True Believer, and it's written by Eric Hoffer, and it was promoted through his presidency and until his death by Eisenhower, because this guy here was brilliant. He was a regular guy. He wrote this book, and he would spend 3 weeks on a paragraph. So when you read it, every sentence, you're going like,
I
he
think I
pointed out
bought
something.
that. I think I did. I'm gonna check afterwards because I'll take it out and read it because you did recommend that.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is the most powerful, one of the most powerful books I ever read. And he says this. It's called True Believer.
Hmm.
And he goes and says that the most ardent communists in Germany before the Nazis took power became the most ardent socialist, nationalist, Nazis, because they're the same. That's the whole point. They're the same.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
realized at that point, and I went to a lot of these freedom movements, and I realized the people in the room, the vast majority of them, were motivated by the same thing. They were just taking different actions. I'm taking the jab.
Fear.
I'm going to
Motivated
live,
by
and I'm going.
fear.
Right, fear of death. Fear of death. So what are they not doing? They're not living. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to die anyway. My father died at 59. I I've seen people who were so great and so grand, and they've died. And whatever they had, it's not theirs. It's rented. It's an illusion. It's like, and at that point, the white pill sticks in, and you say, okay, what do I have control of? What do I have in control? What is important? And what I realized, the currency, because I believe it's not money and it's not things, it's your soul. It's to own you. If you read the end of 1994, there's Winston with O'Brien. And O'Brien is the overlord who tricked Winston, right? Thinking he was joining the resistance. And he goes and says 2+2, and he wants Winston. He needs Winston to say 5, but he's not happy enough with him saying 5. He needs him to believe it. He needs to break him.
Hmm.
Well, guess what? The only currency that exists that I realized is my soul. You can't have it. I rather die. If anybody here has read Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Here was a man who is the heir to Freud. He took over the School of Psychiatry at the University of Vienna. It was a top school in the world. He had his papers. He even brought it to Auschwitz. They beat the shit out of him, and he was an inmate. But what he got to do because of his skills, because of his research, because of like spending many times being introspective, going in,
Yes,
harvesting what
that's
you feel.
critical.
He was the greatest person who could have observed it. And what did he observe? He realized that certain people would never do things. They rather die because they understood that their soul was more valuable than their skin or their things. And other people, they would submit, and whatever it did, they become muscle men. That's what they call them. That's what we now call the modern day muscle man, is a person who is just walking and not being alive, is what we call the NPC, the non-participating character. That's what it is. And if you realize that you are going to anyway. You are allowing yourself to live. If you allow yourself, because most people don't allow themselves, and they're found both on the sleep side, or we call the normies, and they're also found on what we would call people who are awake to the fact that there's an agenda.
Absolutely.
Are you living? Are you
I,
living? And that, I want to
I,
just bring it to one thing, and I'm going to shut up, Tish, because
okay,
I know I have a
I
big
have a
mouth.
great comment about what's happened to me in the last little while on this
And
same
I'm
sort
going
of
to bring
white
it to
pill.
you at that point. I'm gonna bring it to you at because that's why I'm sorry for, because I'm gonna turn it right on you, because I know your story, and it's a great story because we had it last week. So you come to that realization, my soul, and what do I have control over? So Viktor Frankl said the last human freedom is to choose one's own attitude in any given circumstance. And that's the one thing that nobody can take away from you. And at that point, you start seeing the things that you do have control. You also see the things you don't have control, and you make connections. And I know this for a fact. Before I turn over to you, I have a friend. He's out west. You should speak with him. His name's
Oh, sure.
Adrian Spitter. His name is Adrian Spitter, and he's a money manager, and he's taking over more money than ever. Why? What happens? The turnover for people wanting to deal with him, because he's authentic. But you know what their
Yes.
conversations begin with? Their conversations begin what they suffered during COVID, and they become
Oh, yeah.
family. Family. I feel a connection to you that I didn't feel towards my own family. I feel a connection by someone because we
Suffered.
suffered such a tragedy, and we persevered. We're still here. And I look at these people and I say, you are a person who understands your soul is more valuable than a. And I
Yes.
want, before I switch over, I just want to, because my mind's going right now. There's another book I would recommend for your audience, because it's so powerful, because it actually signifies what the problem is in our society and what we've been taught and how we've gone to sleep. There was a book written by a gentleman named Martin Buber in 1922, and he calls it I and Thou. And this
Oh,
goes back
really?
to,
Okay.
and
I
what
will.
it is instead of I in it. Because if I turn you into an it, I can manipulate you, I can beat you up, I can kill you, I can destroy you, I can do whatever. But if I
What's the
look at
guy's
you as
name?
Martin Buber, and the book is called I and Thou. It was written in German back in 1922.
How do you
He
spell his last name?
Buber,
Okay.
Buber.
Okay. All right. I'm going to
And
get that.
I am out. But I want to share with you, which is powerful in my outlook. My outlook is this: I can look at you, Tish, as an it, and then I can manipulate you. I could try to, like, get you to do things that are not in your best interest.
Well, yeah,
I
we've been
can be asleep to evil.
dehumanizing. It's not just, I want to say, it's not just the governments who are dehumanizing us. It's we're doing that to each other because of our fear. Like you can break off a long-term relationship because of your fear and justify it. You can treat people like shit, because you're justifying your fear. And this is the sort of thing we need to wake up to if you want to get to the out of the black pill into the white pill, is I've seen that now. People in the freedom movement, a lot of people are also living in absolute fear. The people who are aware of what's happening but doing nothing, they're living in fear. So they've already sold out their soul. They've already lost if they're sitting there and trying to hide from what's coming. You've already sold your soul. You're already on the other side. The thing to do is as you say, you've got to do what you can, but then strive to enjoy your life. It's the positive path. It's the middle path. It's like the left is warmongering against Russia, and the right is warmongering, in the Middle East. And we need to follow a path of peace. We got to follow a path of maximum positivity, and we've got to be in touch with our own negative emotions, because otherwise you're going to get dragged down. This is a time where people are being triggered into anger, jealousy, resentment. I've never heard of so many relationships falling apart. And a lot of that, bless you,
Thank
is
you.
because we're holding on to all this
It's
stuff.
not COVID.
Yeah, that's funny. But we've got to let go of all of this stuff. Like when I did my after I did my political campaign, and I'm happy I did it. Like I can't run for any of the mainstream parties because they're so corrupt. And for me, I maximized the fun with my team, but we also maximized our impact on communities. We had Dr. Paul Alexander out, and we basically, woke up a whole town on the medical tyranny and the fraud behind COVID. And anyways, many, many good stories. But yeah, I didn't win. I think that's a path I'll follow in the future because it's a positive, proactive path to be rebuilding this country. I want to be part of that. And I established my integrity and honor fighting against the corrupt system, but I'm going to wait for it to fall more. But anyways, I realized afterwards I need to get my house in order. My house was a mess, my life was a mess, like all the things I'd let go. And I'd been living it, my home had been turned into a fortress. I turned it into a fortress either knowingly or unknowingly, all my canned goods and all the stuff I had like prepper, right? Prep for what's going to happen. 2 years later, I have to throw out my canned goods or give it away. And I had all my wake up books on one table, all the different books on the tyranny. My sister still doesn't look at them. She calls it my conspiracy theory table. So I just went to each part of my home and beautified it, put flowers here, tidy this, give away stuff that's not serving me. And I think we need to do that with our lives because we get caught up in either the blue pill, mostly the blue pill or the black pill phase. And we're not getting to the point where we can balance the horrors and the awful things that are going on and be proactively part of not only resisting but creating better systems, but then also stepping into living a better life. Like today, because I'm not, my business was decimated too, I was kicked off LinkedIn, but luckily I'd had some success. I could afford to be like this for a while, but I had a long chat with a homeless guy. I was able to hearten him for 20 minutes, half an hour, and get his life story where I wouldn't have taken time to, quote unquote, smell the roses, get to know people, stop to pay attention, encourage, show kindness to a fellow man, because what they're doing to us is dehumanizing and it's awful. I think that made his day, bought him a sandwich and listened to his story. And that's the sort of thing that people aren't doing for each other, as much as we could.
Well, getting back to what I was sharing with, because it goes hand in hand with what you're saying, especially you took time out to speak with that young man. He's a universe. He's part of a greater universe. I and thou, instead of saying, oh, here's this bum on the street, whatever, and completely dehumanizing, oh, I hope the police remove him or, he moves off somewhere. It's like you looked at him as a thou, a spark of the infinite, to see people, to approach it, to actually say, is there a God? Well, I wasn't a spiritual person, but I look at it and I say, how do I look like this every day? I remember years reading an argument for God, saying that if you took a blind man and gave him a Rubik's Cube and like he just started playing with it by himself, it would take 126 billion years for it to sort of happen. But if you had that blind man have an expert who would say yes and no with every move, within 120 moves, they would actually get that Rubik's Cube. And I'm thinking, I look at this and instead of looking at like I and it, and it's like, the world is innate and
Mm-hmm.
it's dead, and it's like there's no God, there's no miracles, there's nothing. No, I approach it. If you're nice to me, Tish, I get excited. Like you want to know something? I show gratitude now. If you're nice to me, I thank people. Like after I get off this call, I'm gonna say thank you for hanging out with me. Like I got into the point where everybody like they showed me kindness because I knew what it was
I
like.
yes, I found
And the other thing I want, there's you spark something in me because it's a
oh good.
saying which is very powerful about what you were saying. Just, and I love stories, you could tell. And the story goes like this: I felt sorry for myself because I had no shoes until I met a man who had no feet.
Yes,
And you want to know
exactly.
something? I will take that out with this, and I want to talk about how we can wake people up and take control and appreciate those people who are in our lives to actually
So Go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to get you directed back to the solar eclipse because it's a perfect
Oh,
segue
oh,
from
for
finish
sure.
your thought and then this whole, because I think what with the pain I felt like part of my house cleaning was I sent notes to people who really, like in my feeling, deeply betrayed me. And the pain, like during COVID, but I wanted, like, it was a human connection of forgiveness, because you can't hold on to anger or resentment. And yeah, the pain takes a while to work through when you've been treated like a thing. Like we don't all we've stopped honoring relationships and normal way of interacting with each other. And that house cleaning for me, that sort of spiritual forgiveness was very significant in my own cleaning of my house. So I wanted to say this is something we all need to take stock of, is this whole spiritual dimension of I and thou, because we've stopped, it's I and thing. We justified any sort of horrific treatment of each other because it's okay to do it in our minds. We're not
Can I
living in.
give an image? Can I give
Yeah.
an image that represents the white pill for me? I
Yes, please.
imagine that I'm in the center of like Lake Ontario, and I'm dog paddling with all these other people. Dog paddling. It's a beautiful day out, just like the image that's behind you. Like I'm dog paddling. And it's a beautiful day. I'm missing it. And I'm gonna go and run out of energy and I'm gonna drown. And they're all gonna drown too. I'm gonna drown anyway. Now I just want to float. And I'm gonna go and feel the
Float on your
sun on my
back. Yeah.
face. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe a current will catch me, and maybe I'll end up being pulled into thing and I'll survive. But one thing I will not do is I will not miss this beautiful day.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw so many people dog paddling, thinking, oh, I've got to do this and that at some point. So at the same time, even though you and I have been abused, can I ask a question? Because I've asked it of myself. Are you a better person because of that abuse? Because of being ostracized? Because you were called crazy? Are you a better person? Anybody listen who had this happen? Are you a better person? I know I
Yeah.
am.
You know
I'm the
what?
per-
Me too.
I didn't
And
like the person I was. I did not like the person I
well, I
was.
I think I was a good person before, but I was asleep at the wheel. And I think what's happened is the gift is my whole experience of life has deepened and richened. So life is so precious to me. Like I used to just skim through and rushing to the finish line, success, success, success. Now you spiritualize the journey. Every moment is precious. And if, I'm going to say it's not all happy joy, but when you get those darker feelings, like a beautiful music, you can be more in touch with yourself and you can process them. Life is richer. Taken away my success, and I've never felt so rich in life. I have a rich
Me too.
life. I've met so many new people. I get notes of appreciation, people who I've touched them. I've saved people who are gonna do themselves harm. When I ran the first time in the election, just having the courage to speak out what's happening when people don't have anyone else saying it, like the Milgram experience. If no one else is saying, "Hey, this isn't right," and you're in your own mind, you can get in a really dark place. So yes, you're right. I think. I mean, hopefully, we wouldn't want this to stay like this forever, but I guess you get to a certain point. If it does, you just take each day as it comes, and you do have to continue to do something. Like taking the white pill, I just want to clarify, people, doesn't mean all of a sudden you're just like, whatever, the world's fucked, I'll just let it go and have a good life. You're not back to the blue pill. There's a difference between the white pill and the blue pill. Why don't you explain? You're still actively trying to do good, but you're doing it in a balanced way. With that, how would you describe the difference between the
You're
white
doing it in
pill
a
and the blue
balanced way.
pill?
You also understand that I only have control of what I do, what I think. And I realize that someone needs to go through a process, because I went through a process. So a lot of people, like, they look at it and they say normies, 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 like they're asleep, this and that. I have to remember that I'm like, I went through a process. So I'll give you an experiment that was done, which most people have to really consider what this means. They take a bunch of, let's say, just children who are just able to be verbal, and they have a box, and on one side it's orange and on the other side it's blue, and they switch it over and they ask the children what color it is, and now they see blue, so they say on the other side it's blue because they don't have the cognitive ability to
Oh,
see.
right.
So that wasn't the, and then what they do is they go to them at 5 years old when their cognitive abilities, and they can now see spatially in their mind, and they get it right. They know when they're looking at blue, they know the other side is orange. That wasn't the experiment. They were filming them at 2, and they were filming them at 6, at 5, and they showed these 5-year-olds when they were just verbal, and they didn't get it. They said, "No way, I didn't know that. You must have tricked me." See, once we wake up, we forget. We forget what it took for us to actually be what we do. We just see it. Like when in my profession, I deal with tax planning, pulling money out of Canada legally, all that stuff. Well, I have to step back now. I'm 55 years old. I spent 32 years reading, and it didn't happen. I had to learn a language because people speak a code, right? Like in
Yeah.
that world. And I had to learn that. Like, and it's easy for me to say, "Oh, no, you do this, 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 and this." And I'm, and you're looking at me like, and to me, it's easy. Right. I have to remember that there was a time I didn't see that. I didn't have that prism that I saw the world through. And that leads, just one last thing, how do you wake up people? Because I wrote an article. If you go to my blog on petermerrick.com, I got a lot of stuff. If you're listening to Tish and me right now, you won't think I'm crazy, but I got to tell you, a lot of people think like he's crazy, because in essence, I'm calling out the dead elephants in the room. And I said, how do you talk to someone who's asleep? How do you identify that they're asleep? Well, you ask them a question. You ask them questions, but you have to be like Jesus. And what I mean by Jesus, because it doesn't matter if you're Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, any of these things. What does he do? He shows kindness. You go there with an open heart. You go there with, like, you give love.
Yeah.
Similar to, I admire you, Tish, because you went to this person and you gave love. That's what you gave. You gave love. So you go there with an open heart, not with a judgmental, like, I'm going to show that you're an idiot and you don't know crap. No, I go there I ask them a question. And if they spit off the talking points that the government and big banks and everyone think, I understand where they are. So what I would do is I would ask them a question. Well, has it always been like that? Is there another example? I'd see if they're open, because when someone's asleep is they start with their conclusions without, they're not participating. I call it, I have a term for it, infinite and finite. Finite is, the whole purpose is to win, and infinite is to have the game continue. So you go there with open heart. Then number 2, you ask questions. You determine whether this person has sort of been lost, like they become like an NPC, but they're a human being and they got blood going through their veins. There's hope, because as long as you're alive, there's hope. And you ask them questions, and you start having them find their own paradoxes. You let them come to it. You let them come to that understanding. And in essence, you just show kindness. You show kindness rather than with a blunt instrument. And I believe that is also something that it's a mindset, because if I walk into a room and I think the place is terrible, like there's a story that I once heard. This traveler comes by this old man, and he says, "What's the town like that I'm about to enter?" And he said, what was the last town like? And he says, "It was wonderful. It was beautiful. The people were nice. Everything was perfect." And he says, "It's very much like the town you just left." Another traveler comes and he says, "What's the town like?" And he goes and says, "It's terrible. There's thieves. It was a terrible experience." And he says, "It's much like the town you just left." Wherever you go, you take yourself, and it's your perspective. And in essence,
Yes.
human beings, I used to go on national television, CTV and City TV and on CBC, and I used to be asked all the time, do you think there's going to be recession? Well, at that time when I was asleep, of course, I didn't know they were manufactured. I believed in what they told us, but that's besides the point. Let's go back to where I was,
Yes.
not where I am.
Well,
So I want to, I just want to leave this point because it goes
okay.
hand in hand
I
with
have
what you
something
did.
to add when you finish that. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to shut up. I know I'm bad, but I really like talking to you, Tish. That's why I won't
Oh,
shut up.
thank you. I love.
So, so I would ask on national television, you think there's going to be a recession? And I said, of course things are, when people overspend, then they got to, like when people get drunk, they got to go and have a hangover after, that was my analogy. But I said, I'm optimistic. And he said, why? Because people need people. And when people are open and they're willing to trade, new ideas happen and things expand. And an infinite player looks at it this way. If I have an idea, I'm not going to hide it. You have an idea. If you hide it, you have an idea. I have an idea. But if we share it, now we both have two ideas.
You
And
know what?
maybe as an
Yeah.
infinite player, we're going to bring in other people. And you know what's really great about this? We don't know. We did not know where people were, but COVID allowed us to see people who are awakening, and those people understand the most important currency, and that is you as a human being. And when you understand that you're a human being and you have feeling and you're an independent thinker, you're going to see it in other people. And if you're an incredible person, meaning that you're an incredible person who's humble, to realize you're an idiot, like I realize I'm the biggest idiot out there, you will be able to have empathy for other people, because a lot of people, what's happened is I don't know, I was reading about 3% of the population are psychopaths, and I think maybe there's
Yeah.
25% who are sociopaths. Well, guess what? To
It
get
doesn't
people
have
to
to be
reconnect
that.
doesn't
Well,
have to be. Please
no,
share.
you brought up a couple things. And one of the books that I haven't read yet, but highly recommend, Lyndon LaRoche, There Is No Limit to Growth, because part of the con job with all like the scarcity, making us believe there's everything scarce, you have to compete for survival of the fittest, the whole fraud behind Darwin, if you've ever learned about that.
Yeah.
There is no limit to growth. The earth is probably way, way bigger. There's so much potential. All the minerals are being hidden. They're suppressing prices of silver. I mean, once you go down and you realize the magnitude of lies, you get really creative, which I find it releases your creative thinking. And that's a book I recommend for people. Lyndon LaRoche, There Is No Limit to Growth. But I wanted to do an analogy from what I've, kind of gleamed out of what you've said today. I think it's really fascinating when you think of the blue pill is you're being enslaved, but you're asleep to the facts. So you just operate out kind of on autopilot with your life, but you're not paying attention. Red pill is like you're fuck. You wake up, I'm being enslaved, right? And then black pill is like we're all being enslaved. It's all fucked. What's the point? And white pill is you finally get to the point where I'm enslaving myself. And what can I do to stop it? Because ultimately, what I've seen both in the sleep people and in people in the freedom movement is we're doing this to ourselves. We're enslaving ourselves with our fear, whether it's fear of the vaccine or fear of, the totalitarians who are going to get us. They're already winning because we're living in fear, envy, desire, jealousy, hate, shame, guilt, all of these lower feelings. And when you get to the white pill and you're like, fuck, I've been doing this to myself, you can rise above it. You can participate in everything. You can give love to people, you can be open-minded, you can create new money systems, you can share because you're not hoarding, you can be generous, you can be kind, you can have a much richer life when you get to the white pill phase of your life. And I think that's, for me, is that I'm not enslaved by them, and I'm not enslaved. I'm very conscious of the things and the traumas that enslaved me or kept me down in certain areas. And when you go through the work, and I really recommend to Dr. David Hawkins about transcending human.
I love Power versus Force.
I
Yes,
read it. I have all his books now.
yes, I have
Isn't
them
that
too.
amazing?
You're such a nerd. I read all.
I
His
am
first one
a
was his
nerd.
best.
Well,
His
that's the
first is the
benefit.
best.
That's the benefit of being single, is I've got all this time to myself and I'm reading like crazy. I'm mountain biking and swimming. And, as I
Well, I
wait
was
for
doing that when I
God to
was
send me
married, so
my
that's
husband.
maybe why I became single.
What? Yeah, it
I
is.
was doing that while I was married.
Yeah. Well, but you can see the difference of life. And I think that's the biggest lesson. When I went through my house 2 years ago, even, or three, when I built the fortress, because I was so scared, I've let a lot of that go. And I'm, getting rid of all the shit, even in my home. I'm going to do that workshop. But when you get to the white pill phase, I mean, you're not giving up. You're not stopping, but you live
No.
differently. You live
You're
more.
enjoying the little things in life and having appreciation. For example, every time I walk, I don't know why I walk, and the reason I love San Diego, I didn't get a car when I moved back. I walk everywhere. Like that's, I lost 30
Yes.
pounds. Like I'm in the best
Well,
shape that I've been in a long time.
that's
And but my whole point is I walk by a tree and I feel this need to just touch it. Like, it's
yeah,
nature, right? Like I need to touch it. I need to like feel it. I want to just like observe things, just see people watch, and it's like I don't even have to, like, I'm not spending money. I see people going to great restaurants and like trying to do things, so they're distracting themselves. They're distracting
yes.
themselves from the people around them. So I want to get back
Well, there's a
to,
great book I have to
oh
say,
yeah.
because you're talking about, and I forget who wrote it, but it was in German. I mean, I studied German literature and certain things. Some of the deep writers, having versus being. So people living, having stuff, trying to make them happy, versus living, being, just being alive is so critical.
And that was my analogy of treading water, or just like enjoying what you have. But can we transition back to what's
The
happening on
solar
April 8th?
eclipse.
Yes,
Okay,
because this
yes, please.
actually,
And we have to finish. Yeah.
audience, let's put all this into context.
Yes, please.
Okay, right now they're saying it's passing 8 different cities called Nineveh, and it's like we're starting, like, you might go and like read into this stuff if you went down the rabbit hole, which I'm assuming most of your audience has done. This might be the end. They knew this. Like, the world is not the way it is. Is it flat? Is it round? Is there a dome? Whatever. It's like, is there a
It's
time clock that
round.
basically there's going to be a reset? Are we going to have a mud flood? Like, you name it, right? Like, is there going to be like,
But
is
wait,
is
can
the
we?
technology going to? I want to leave this with the audience. Let's say it's going to end. Let's say, ask yourself this question: have you lived? Now, let's say you haven't. That's okay, because guess what? It doesn't matter when a kid learns to read, Monday or Friday. It's important that they learn to read. So if you can't say that honestly to yourself, have I lived? You still are here, and that means there's hope, and you can live today. That could be nice to someone, that could be sweet to someone. Like, the world could like stop, the sun stops in the sky, we all die. The question, one thing that I like to believe is, I'm not this carcass. I see this 55-year-old male looking in the mirror, and I'm still the same person I was when I was 5. The question is, am I living today? And ask yourself, what are those things you can do? Because only you do, because my things that I like are not what you like, that I can actually say I lived today. Because we never know when that day is. And let's say the only difference between April 8th and when you're going to leave anyway is, let's say we all leave on April 8th, right?
Well,
Let's
I
say
have.
that's what it is. Like, we all know, well, but it doesn't matter. So let's say we know that that's our last day. Some people
Well,
believe it's our last day. Did you live? What can you
yes.
do today to live?
I think that's a great takeaway for people. Are you living your best life? Are you loving deeply? Because living is loving. And how many people have you impacted in a positive way? What's the worth? What are you giving instead of what are you getting? I wanted to bring up one thing. I don't know this story well, but the story of Jonah in the Bible, Nineveh was and I may correct me if I'm wrong, but the story biblically was that God had called him to go back to the town. and tell them to repent. And he took off instead of doing what the Lord had told him. And then he got caught up in the belly of the whale, but God saved him, spit him out. And then he went back to Nineveh, and the people there repented. And so a lot of, I mean, I've listened to a few podcasts, at least one who said it's a call to repent our sins. So sort of that we could start over. That is like the reset part, is that you gotta face where you were a shitty human being, where you kind of screwed this person over deliberately. Maybe you skimmed a bit. Maybe you were too selfish. It's a call to move into a new paradigm where we're not so selfish, where we're serving each other, where you also honor yourself and you're an individual. But the way that we move forward is by honoring each other as well. And that goes back to this book, which I'm going to get, this I and thou. You can honor yourself and honor the other. And we've forgotten how to do that. And so part of this whole spiritual journey with this eclipse, or the symbolism rather, is that we're called to repent, because look at what we've got living so selfishly, this scarcity hoarding model. We have a sick society. We have a deranged, like, we have lost our middle class. We have moving closer and closer towards a total enslavement with the biblical New World Order. Everything from mind control to wet energy weapons to poisoning and social credit scores. You name it's being thrown at us. And our choice needs to be a different path. And that's where you get when you come to the white pill, because you're not ready still to live differently when you're in any of the other phases, blue, red, or black. And that's one of the things I took from this, whatever happens, if it's just 2 minutes or if anything goes down for an extended period. What will we get in our spirit and soul? What lessons will we get so we can live a better life? Because what we've created by living these ways selfishly is a hell on earth. We have created ourselves. If we want heaven on earth, we have to go about it differently. And it starts, in my opinion, with repentance, so that we can start afresh.
And a change can happen in a moment. It's a click.
Yes, or
It's
2
just
minutes.
like you could add, there's a scene that I always think about when I think about waking up, is if you've seen the movie Field of Dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the brother-in-law who's trying to get Ray, who happens to be the Kevin Costner character, to sell the property at the end. And he says, you're delusional, you're this, you're that. Like, I only doing this because I don't want my sister on the street. Him and his partners are trying to take over his farm. And then in a moment, something happens. And he says, and for those of you who don't know the movie, they're playing baseball, but
Mm-hmm.
these are dead ghosts. And in a moment, he says, where did all these players come from? Where did they all come? And he then starts saying, Ray, don't sell the farm. Just 5 minutes before he was saying, sell the farm.
Yeah. Oh, right. I remember that vaguely.
The other thing I want to share and give a visualization, because it's helpful for me, is this process that both you and I have gone through, right? Like, that's we're tired. I'm tired. Like, one of the reasons I don't really, I can't worry about this anymore, because my nerve endings are like burnt, right? I'm just like tired. It's like, okay, take me, like, take me. I don't have any more energy. However, I always think, which is a powerful image for me, happens to be, I'm not a fan of Tom Hanks, but he's got two movies that's really powerful. I know, no, but there's the symbolism is powerful, because yeah, like, they tell us this
images of him. He's a
yeah,
bad
well,
guy.
not I don't say that, but they also give us the secret, because they have to give us the map out of the place, because we have to, like, give our souls to them, right? Like, they have to tell us if we don't do anything, they'll destroy us. But the image is this: when he's in Forrest Gump and he gets really upset, so Jenny leaves him, his love, and now he's got in like red pill, like, she left me. What does he do? He's running across America 3 times, and on the 3rd time he just turns to all these people and says, I'm done.
Yeah.
Whatever caused me to do it, I'm done. The last image I want to share, which comes from Castaway, or that movie he did when he's stuck on the island, and he wants to kill himself and everything. He thinks life is over, and he doesn't do it. A sail comes out of nowhere. A sail, and that sail, which happens to be half of an outhouse, right? That changes his mind through the right people, the right circumstances, the frame of mind. You could see the world as shit, or you can see it as a thou and as wonder. And I have to thank you so much, Tish, because you made my day better today. It started off by
Oh,
sharing how you did something great by being you, by speaking to another human being, and by you spending time with me and inviting me on your podcast. And I thank you.
well, I thank you too, Peter. It was nice. It's nice to have the connection of a fellow journeyer in this incredible experience we're going through. That was a real. I hope people enjoyed that, and it might have lifted someone up today who's stuck in the black pill or the blue pill. I get new listeners, or just having a shit day, whatever. So thank you so much. That was great. And what's your book again, just for the audience, and how can people
My
follow?
my book, my book is called The King of Main Street. I want
Is it
to just
finance? Is it a finance book?
no. It's a story on what it takes to be a healthy elder. It shows an arc of someone who's young, who's focusing on
Okay.
the first half of life, which is accumulation ego, and then it looks at the healthier person, focuses on the second half where they go within, they mind what's in, and they give everything else, their wisdom and everything else. And it's an arc. But
Okay.
as you're saying that, I just want to focus just before we leave on the book I've been writing. And if you want to see snippets of it, it's on my website, petermerrick.com. You'll see it in Peter Talks, because I've done a brain dump. And what it comes down to is this: I'm calling the book Lie to Me. And we talked about that earlier. And what that means is, like, if you're not willing to take responsibility, and the responsibility is like, I have to pay my tax. No, I mean, the responsibility is of what you think, taking
Mhm.
ownership of what you think and what you've abdicated to other people or things or beliefs or whatever. You've never checked it out for yourself, because all I have is my senses, right? And my experiences. If you haven't done that, you welcome people to lie to you. You welcome the
Yeah.
government to lie to
Okay.
you,
Yeah.
because it's easier to be lied to than to accept the truth. And the truth
Oh,
is this:
right.
you're lying
Okay.
to yourself. And as soon as you actually stop lying to yourself, the veil lifts.
Yes.
And do I have
I
the
like
answers?
that. Yeah.
Absolutely not. I do not have the answers. I just know one thing: the more honest I get with myself, what my needs are, and what makes me feel good and what doesn't, and what does not. Ripping people off, fucking people over does not make me feel good. It doesn't.
No, exactly. And can you
Actually helping
say,
someone talking.
go ahead.
Sorry. No, I please.
I was sorry. I was just going to say one thing people would love here in Canada is a any sort of financial tip. Since you're a tax advisor, that's the one thing we didn't talk about was money.
Oh,
And I just as we're leaving in this
well,
11th, I'm like, I forgot to ask Peter anything
that's
about money.
okay.
We got so caught up in the journey and all of the pills on the way and all of the stuff that I
You can
forgot
write
to ask you.
you could write a bio that I'm an expert in Canada, US cross border. So a bit of my journey is I've written 3 textbooks, financial textbooks, that were taught in universities and college across Canada. I wrote for the largest accounting publication for 18 years. I had hair. I did back then. If you go and Google me, you'll see there's pictures with hair. And what happened during COVID is a lot of people are looking at Canada, and you weren't going to promote me before, Tish, because you were running for the government at that point, because I focus on helping people legally, because you know the
Leave.
rules, leave with
Yeah.
their money, with
Right.
your money.
Okay.
And the one tip I'm going to give people, which is out there, and we should talk about having you promoted offline, is gold and silver. Because let me share something with you. There in the United States, I'll talk about the US because I know it quite well, because that's where I'm living. If I own gold eagles, They're valued for currency purposes of $50. That means I can travel outside the US with over $1 million of coins. Now, it is quite heavy of gold because they're gold eagles, and it would be over $1 million, but it would only be valued at $9,950 because I would bring 499 coins with me. It's going to be 16 kilos, but you can go and leave with everything.
Yeah.
But that being said, but you could go and have like 50 coins. You could, things like that, like the travel to be able to. Number two, when you legally, this is a big thing. When you sell them, let's say it goes up to $10,000, you don't pay tax on it. It's not reported.
Yeah. Right.
So the
No,
value, for currency purposes, it's $50, the gold coin,
that's a good,
US.
I didn't know that.
And it's
That's good to
two,
know.
well, let's go and look at this. We don't have pennies anymore. So you have nickels, dimes, and quarters, right? See, I am Canadian, right?
Yeah.
Loonies and toonies, right? And see,
Yeah.
there'll be a
A lot of
is there a
loonies in
$5 coin yet?
Canada. Yeah.
Is there a $5 coin yet? I don't know if
No,
that's happened.
no, there's a
Okay,
bill.
so it will. There'll be $100 coin soon. There won't be because it'll be all in your wrist, right? So
Mark of the
the
beast.
point
Yeah.
is, yeah, the point I'm making is when you hold a dime, a quarter, a nickel, it costs more money. It's got more stuff in it than a dime, a quarter, and a nickel.
Yeah.
The same thing is this is legal tenure. You can do maple leafs. You can do now maple leaves for tax purposes in the States that they won't get taxed when you sell it for growth. However, if you're in the States and you have gold eagles or silver eagles, and that's what they're called, like we have toonies and loonies, right? The value of it happens to be an ounce of gold. But the value that when they say how much you're bringing, it happens to be a little bit. And it's always good to have. Now, one last thing I want to share with
So
you. I've
you're
been
saying
working
people should always travel with some precious metals just in case they get caught up in a pinch?
that would be if you like, I'm white pilled, but at the same time, I want to remain white pilled. So I want to be able to go and establish where I am. So yes, you could travel with like 5 gold coins in your pocket, right? You like travel with it like $10,000, or let's say 10 gold coins or 17, 20, right? Like you could have that. And it is, I'm skeptical. I don't understand crypto, but I know one thing. It's all digital. It's not real. And I think it's also, that's the problem. I think people are like living in their mind space. I believe that it's not real. There's things that are real. There's food, there's land,
Yeah,
there's gold,
exactly.
there's silver. Like these are things I can touch and things like that. And I'm in
Right,
the finance. Like I wrote, for your
right,
audience, I
right.
wrote part of the Canadian securities course. Like I'm the guy who would be talking about derivatives and whatever for teaching future young brokers. And I got to tell you, it's not real. There's such a disconnect. And that's really what we want to move away from. The other thing is, if you are going to stay in the beast system, and the beast system you can't get away with, right? All these people who have crypto or have gold and whatever, they still have to convert it back into the beast system. They haven't left the beast system, right? Because they got to still get fiat.
Yeah.
Because unless you're going to find bartering, it's going to be very difficult. There are things that you can do. And I'm going to share one thing that I moved all my clients to are in Canada, and I do this quite often. I have them purchase um, products, whether it's a GIC or their investment in a mutual life insurance company. And the reason I do that is one is it's not on the beast system, it's owned by the policy holders. On
Oh,
top of that, they're required to have reserves, something none of the banks have. Like there's no money in your, like that GIC you have, there's no money. Like they removed it, there's no reserve, there's no money. That's not the case for insurance companies, and they are required to buy safer stuff just because of the nature. So a GIC, and on top of
where can you
or
get
a
it, a
life.
GIC and an insurance company? Can you get that just through any bank or?
No, you have to go to somebody like me to buy a GIC.
Oh,
You know,
and what would
and
be the return?
the same as whatever you get in the bank. But the
Oh, like
difference is
for, yeah,
people
okay.
people don't understand. You're buying a contract, and you have to understand what the contract is. And a lot of people, we all know that it's a house of cards. We know that. The
Yeah,
other thing is I would share is a participating life insurance policy with a mutual life company. Now, I want to share with you, Manulife, Sun Life, they're not mutual life companies. And what that means is they are there working for BlackRock, they're are all the big, like all the big, the
yeah.
beast. And all the profit and everything is going to the beast. That's all it is. And basically, that's what it is. A mutual life insurance company is owned by the policyholders. That means when they make a profit and there's money to distribute back because they have more money, it goes to the policyholders because
It's
they're the
like a
ones who own the company.
mutual fund. It's like pardon me, a credit company, a credit,
A
like,
co-op.
yeah, like it sounds like that cooperative spirit. Yeah,
It,
okay.
it is, but the reserves in a life insurance company are higher than a bank. You can buy the same thing.
It's good to
You
know.
can, and I only bring this up to you, and I only share this with your audience because even though I can go and have gold and silver, or I could have Bitcoin, I still have to participate right now because you and I are talking over. Like I could have all the gold in the world. My service provider for my internet is not going to take my gold.
No.
So the question is, and this is the way I look at it, if the system was to collapse, how are you going to be highest on the shore before the wave comes in? You will not, you will get hit. We will all get hit. You want to be the last person to be hit. And you can take charge right now. So the two things that I do is I de-risk Canadians with their portfolios, with their investments. I de-risk them. In essence, I'm into risk mitigation. Like, how do I
Right.
lessen your
Okay.
risk? I can't stop you from your family, stop talking to you. I can't do this and that. However, I might be able to organize your affairs that you'll be one of the last people to buy tuna
Right.
when the world
Okay.
falls apart.
All right.
And
Two
my
more minutes.
expertise, yeah, my expertise, and this is the last thing, is Canadians who have decided that they've had it.
And are
I can
leaving.
help them. I can help them financially leave where they'll pay the least amount of taxes in Canada and to establish themselves in the States that they will pay the least amount of taxes less than Americans. And I specifically work with successful business owners who are probably in their 50s to 70s who've just said, I've made a good living here. I've had a good life. It's time.
Oh,
The
yeah. Okay.
government has now encroached on my freedoms. And
Oh,
leaving it
yeah.
with this is in the world I lived. I shared with you about my good friend who worked at CBC. He said,
Yes.
you haven't seen what happened because he says you're living with a little bubble. Well, in 2017, when they
Right.
burst the bubble, they started attacking on small business when they changed the Income Tax Act, and then in 2020 when they started shutting down businesses.
Well,
And
now
these
we've
people
got
say,
Bill
I'm just going to leave.
C-63 that you could get put in jail just for like basically thinking something hateful. The intention to potentially spread misinformation or hate. So it's like it's totally sci-fi. And I think these guys, what's his name, A Brave New World, they were all hired for predictive
Huxley,
program. Huxley, they were like Fabian deep state actors
yes.
hired to program us that it's inevitable so we don't fight back. Keep your courage, keep your fighting spirit, get to the white pill and help to bring back our countries. They want you to think it's pointless. Your actions don't matter. Couldn't be the opposite. Every single action, every person who speaks the truth, stands their ground, makes a difference to crash things at the bottom. We have to take out the bottom because we're enslaving ourselves. And when you realize you're
We are
enslaving
much
yourself,
more.
we're much more. Let's leave it at that. Great to talk to you, Peter. Have a wonderful rest.
Just thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye now. We'll talk soon. I have some questions on the finance side. Bye now. Bye.